The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach them. Then Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, "Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He hardly knew what to say. They were so terrified. Then a cloud came, casting a shadow over them. From the cloud came a voice, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus alone with them. As they were coming down from the mountain, he charged them not to relate what they had seen to anyone, except when the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what rising from the dead meant. The Gospel of the Lord. Jerome Gonzalez, a 44-year-old father of 2 from New Jersey. Jerome Gonzalez, known by his friends as quite the Renaissance man, quite the edifying artist and poet, loving father, and someone who has become known by his friends as one who would suffer for and sacrifice for others. Jerome Gonzalez died 9 days ago on the first Friday of Lent, doing something that he loved to do, participating in an exercise in which he was literally working to sacrifice for others and suffer with others. We're learning that Jerome had received a glimpse of his death and had been dreaming about dying from a heart attack for some time. And armed with that glimpse, he made a conscious choice to be very loving and to suffer for others and to sacrifice for others. I first learned about Jerome when I was invited to gather at a commemoration of his life. Now, Jerome lived on the East Coast, but his influence was so far and wide that a friend of mine who lives in Washington knew him very well. And he said, "Guys, we got to get together and not just raise funds to support Jerome's family, but we have to get together and do what Jerome was doing shortly before he died." And so on a very cold Wednesday night down in Renton with snow falling all around, 9 of us gathered and participated in some very strenuous exercise of carrying each other and suffering with and for each other. It's what our friend really needed. I need you to be there. That's the most fitting way to pay tribute to his life. Jerome was acting on that glimpse, and he chose to suffer and to sacrifice. And so we're here with the gospel of the transfiguration of Jesus, this glimpse of the divine that God allows to be given to a few of his apostles and then subsequently handed on to us. And in the transfiguration, it's good to recognize that Jesus reveals a suffering Messiah. Not the military conquering Messiah, but Jesus in his full divinity is revealed as the Old Testament foretold. He's appearing with Moses and Elijah. And we come to understand that the Old Testament points toward Jesus. And we see him as the beloved Son of God who will be sacrificed for us. We see him as the suffering servant from Isaiah, the fulfillment of all things. And that Jesus' suffering would remind us that the suffering of the present time that we live in is not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed to us. It enables us to have hope, to live in that hope, having had a glimpse. Perhaps that concept of getting a glimpse of the divine or getting a glimpse of eternity is recognizable to us all. I think it has something to do with when we look into the eyes of our girlfriend or boyfriend, our soon-to-be fiance, and we see something there. We don't just see happily ever after. We see the fullness of sacrificial love in our marriage. But when we get that glimpse, it makes us ready to propose, to offer the fullness of our lives to our beloved. Okay? Perhaps you can recognize that glimpse when you hold your newborn in your arms and you recognize that you have the capacity to offer your life for another. You know, I was walking down the school hallway not long ago, and I'm always inspired by what's hanging on the walls. Indeed, just looking at some of the posters, you get a glimpse of eternity. And recently I came across a little prayer on a poster written by a child, and it said, "Dear Jesus, help me to be more like you. Help me to be kind. Help me to be forgiving." Handing on what we've received from Jesus. The sixth station of the stations of the cross, Veronica wipes the face of Jesus, and we see in Veronica's name, true image. And we're encouraged to be true images of Jesus' love for others so that we might even reveal a glimpse of God's love to others. That sixth station ends with a beautiful prayer reminding us that we feel God's love and understanding in the consolation and support we receive from one another. We receive God's love and an understanding of who God is through the actions of one another. The same way that my friend invited us to that snowy evening in Renton to commemorate Jerome's life by doing what he did shortly before he died, I think is the same way that we reach out to each other and encourage each other to attend the liturgy, isn't it? We need each other here to commemorate what Jesus was doing right before he died, revealing the suffering love of God, the sacrificial love of God for us, that we might ever get a glimpse. You know, in order to get an authentic glimpse of God's love, we must always be cautious about where we are gazing. Where we are gazing will give us the glimpse. And so may it always be that we're drawn here together to gaze upon Jesus, to gaze upon the love of God, so that we go forth and find God's love at work around us all throughout the week as well. In this way, may we always continue to avail ourselves of God's grace and be fully alive in God so that when it is our turn to be called home to eternity, we may die in God's friendship. Or as our friend Jerome would say, that we would die living.